It's my area of expertise. Actually, I think the superdelegate situation is interesting because the superdelegates, they're actually like the party elites, supposedly in the Democratic Party, and you'll hopefully we have more situations like Minnesota, where after Bernie Sanders won Minnesota, the superdelegates from Minnesota they decided to switch their votes to align with what the state voted. I would expect that more would do that just for the sake of uh, their own candidacies, because at some point they will be up for election, and their people who voted for Bernie Sanders, hopefully they ask why didn't you align your vote with us? Because the people's voice is what should matter. I don't believe we should have super delegates. No one person should their vote shouldn't be more than the next person's, even if they do have a party elite position. So what may end up happening is they won't switch because they're loyal to the establishment, they're loyal to the Democratic Party. But when their elections come up, their constituents, their people who they represent, they're gonna ask, they're gonna say, why didn't you vote the same way we did? We obviously feel a certain way. And it's gonna be interesting to see if the super delegates don't budge, because they may be forfeiting their position. But it's gonna be very interesting to see what happens.
I'm not a delegate, I'm not a super delegate, and we have our resident delegate expert here. I would only add that in both parties, both the Democratic and Republican Party, what this election has been able to do is to show us how undemocratic our nomination process is. That in fact, when we think that we're voting for someone to represent us, that in fact that may not actually happen. That very connected people may be the ones who determine the fate, irrespective of the fact that we may have all voted. And I think what this has done and what has been happening over the last several decades is to force the democratization of our electoral system and our electoral process. And I'm happy that at least we're having this conversation. I mean, there used to be a point where the state legislatures, right, selected the Senate, right? The people didn't have that, and the people fought, and we got that right. And we had electoral college system where in 2000, and I remember that very clearly, President Bush did not win the popular vote, but he won the electoral college vote. And I think that was the beginning of the awakening of the average person to realize that in every sense of the word, whether it's our financial system, whether it's our political system, whether it's our electoral system, that the system has been rigged against us, the average person. And I'm not saying this to disparage anyone, because I actually, again, I was one of those people who wanted to vote for Secretary Clinton on April 19th. I was one of those people who wanted to see a woman president. I still do. I was one of those people who felt so impassioned that we needed to take a new direction, that I couldn't just stand by idly and allow my desire to make history blind my judgment to understanding what we need as a country. And I think we need to be clear that our super delegate situation, that the delegate process, the process by which we elect and appoint and nominate folks to represent us to go against the other parties, needs also some radical shifts and some radical changes. And that it should be a more inclusive process. It should be a process where one vote per one person, where a group of party leaders can't shift the direction and the will of the people. And I think that we need to be honest and own that, and we need to be forceful in our direction towards creating a more democratic system.
I'd just like to add, we need a real democracy, not a slip veneer of democracy, because we do have a democracy now, as long as you don't get someone like Donald Trump. We do have a democracy now, as long as you don't get a close election like Bush versus Gore. So really, we don't have a democracy, and I think that is definitely going to change, especially after this election cycle. I think this election cycle is good for America, despite the advent of Donald Trump, because it shows how unfair, unequal the system is, how the system is stacked against the average person. When the conservative line has been, since the early 90s, is that the person is to blame for their lot in life. And also, I think what it's going to do, it's going to get rid of the radicals. You know, you listen to talk radio, these conservatives are always talking about Ronald Reagan this, Ronald Reagan that, like Ronald Reagan was a prophet. They forgot that when the deficit got so high, Ronald Reagan raised taxes. They forgot that George H.W. Bush, read my lips, no new taxes. When the deficit got so high, he raised taxes. But we have a group of radicals, and it's not working, and people are fed up. And white working class men especially aren't buying into that. We'll vote for these people who cater to the rich, but I can open up my business and I can become rich. Or I'll vote for these people that cater to the rich, but it'll trickle down to me. It's not trickling down. They're not becoming rich. So I think the system is going to change.